vibration on a phone, 9 devastating words glowing on a cracked screen. That is all it takes to obliterate a 2-year romance, thousands of dollars in wedding deposits, and a young bride's trusting heart. High society can be vicious, feeding on the weak and bowing only to immense power. But what happens when the seemingly penniless girl, discarded like trash, holds a secret that commands global respect? Betrayal is a bitter pill, but absolute power delivers the perfect cure. For 2 years, I lived a carefully constructed lie, though my intentions were entirely pure. My name, as far as the high society circles of Manhattan knew, was Amelia Rose. I was a quiet, dedicated art restorer who spent her days carefully removing centuries of grime from Renaissance oil paintings in a dusty studio in Chelsea. I lived in a modest walk-up apartment, took the subway, and bought my coffee from a corner bodega. What the Manhattan elite did not know, and what I had sworn to keep secret until I knew I had found a man who loved me for my soul rather than my pedigree, was my true identity. I was Her Royal Highness Princess Amelia of the Sovereign Principality of San Stefano, an impossibly wealthy European microstate bordering the Mediterranean. My grandfather was King Richard, a man whose geopolitical influence and private wealth eclipsed the GDP of several small nations. But royal life is a gilded cage. Growing up, every man I met saw me as a title, a networking opportunity, or a stepping stone to a throne. When I moved to New York under a pseudonym, I craved normalcy. I wanted to be loved for the paint on my overalls, not the diamonds in my tiara. And then I met Nathaniel Pierce. Nathaniel was a junior partner at a prestigious private equity firm. We bumped into each other at an art gallery opening in Soho. He was charming, handsome, and seemed genuinely captivated by my knowledge of 17th century brushstrokes. He asked me out, and for the first year it was pure magic. He brought me daisies instead of orchids. We ate cheap pizza on the Brooklyn Bridge. He seemed to relish the fact that I wasn't part of his mother's suffocating world of country clubs and charity galas. His mother, Eleanor Pierce. Eleanor was the matriarch of the Pierce family, a woman who treated New York's social register like a sacred religious text. From the moment Nathaniel brought me to their sprawling Upper East Side penthouse, Eleanor's perfectly manicured claws came out. She looked at my simple, off-the-rack dress with an expression usually reserved for finding a cockroach in a Michelin-starred salad. "Amelia, darling," she had purred, sipping her dry martini. "An art restorer. How quaint. Do you actually make a living wage doing that, or do you rely on government assistance?" Nathaniel had weakly chuckled, brushing it off as his mother's eccentric sense of humor. That was my first red flag, but I was so blinded by love that I ignored it. When Nathaniel proposed in Central Park 18 months into our relationship, I was ecstatic. He slipped a modest 2-carat diamond ring onto my finger, a ring his mother later made sure to inform me was an embarrassment to the Pierce family name, but suitable for a girl of your station. I didn't care. I loved him. I planned to tell him the truth about my heritage a month before the wedding. I wanted him to commit to the penniless art restorer first. The wedding planning, however, became an absolute nightmare. Eleanor completely hijacked the process. She insisted on booking the grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel. She ordered imported white peonies from Holland that cost more than a luxury car. She invited 300 of her closest friends, senators, CEOs, and socialites, leaving me only 20 slots for my guests. I told her my family couldn't travel much, which was a half-truth. A royal security detail moving internationally is a logistical nightmare. "It's fine, Amelia." Eleanor had sneered during a fitting for my wedding dress, which she had insisted on paying for and subsequently used as a weapon of guilt. "We all know you have no one of importance to invite. This wedding is about the Pierce family maintaining our standard. Try not to slouch in that silk, dear. It highlights your complete lack of posture." I swallowed the humiliation. I smiled. I endured. I told myself that once Nathaniel and I were married, we would distance ourselves from her venom. I was so close to revealing my secret. I had drafted the letter to my grandfather asking him to arrange a private flight to New York. I imagined the look on Eleanor's face when she realized her nobody daughter-in-law was literal royalty. but I waited too long. It was exactly 4 days before the wedding. The atmosphere in New York was electric with the humid energy of late June. My tiny apartment was filled with half-packed suitcases for our honeymoon to Santorini, a trip I had anonymously upgraded to a luxury private villa, planning to surprise Nathaniel with my true wealth once we were legally bound. I was sitting on the floor handwriting thank you notes to my few friends who had sent early gifts when my phone vibrated on the coffee table. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from Nathaniel. I smiled, expecting a sweet message about how he couldn't wait to see me at the altar. Instead, my eyes scanned the words, and the breath was violently knocked from my lungs. Amelia, I'm sorry. I can't do this. My mother was right, we are from two entirely different worlds. You aren't one of us, and I need someone who understands the burden of my family's legacy. It wouldn't work. The wedding is off. Please don't call me, I need space. I stared at the glowing screen until the words blurred together into a meaningless, jagged pattern. The wedding is off. Via text message. 4 days before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. My hands began to violently tremble. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. No, I whispered to the empty apartment. No, this is a joke. A cruel, terrible joke. I snatched the phone back up and dialed his number. It rang twice before clicking over to his polished voicemail. I called again. And again. On the 5th try, the automated voice told me the number was no longer accepting my calls. He had blocked me. Panic, hot and suffocating, clawed up my throat. I threw on a jacket over my pajamas and sprinted out of my apartment. I hailed a cab, my mind racing with 1,000 terrifying scenarios. Was he having a breakdown? Was Eleanor forcing him to do this? He loved me. I knew he loved me. When the cab pulled up to Nathaniel's luxury high-rise in Tribeca, I practically threw a $20 bill at the driver and ran to the glass doors. The doorman, a kind older man named Hector, who always smiled at me, stepped in front of the door with a deeply apologetic look. Miss Amelia, I am so sorry, Hector said, refusing to meet my eyes. Mr. Pierce left strict instructions. You aren't allowed upstairs. Hector, please, I just need to see him. I need to know he's okay. I pleaded, tears finally spilling over my eyelashes. He's not here, miss. He left an hour ago with his mother, and... Hector hesitated, his voice dropping to a whisper out of sheer pity. He left with Miss Astor, too. Miss Astor. Penelope Astor. Penelope was an old money heiress whose family practically owned half of Manhattan real estate. Eleanor had relentlessly paraded Penelope in front of Nathaniel at every social gathering, loudly lamenting that Nathaniel hadn't settled down with a girl of substance. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Nathaniel hadn't just gotten cold feet. He had traded me in. The pressure from his mother, the lure of an easy, hyper-wealthy alliance, it had all proven stronger than whatever weak, spineless love he had harbored for me. I walked back to my apartment in a daze, the city noise muffled as if I were underwater. When I finally unlocked my door, my phone was ringing. It wasn't Nathaniel. The caller ID flashed Eleanor Pierce. I answered, my voice a hollow rasp. Hello. Amelia. Good you're near your phone. Eleanor's crisp, aristocratic voice echoed in my ear. There was no sympathy in her tone, only cold businesslike triumph. I assume Nathaniel has delivered the news. He texted me, I choked out. He broke off our wedding in a text message. Let me speak to him, Eleanor. He has nothing more to say to you, she replied smoothly. Nathaniel has finally come to his senses. He realizes that an alliance with the Astor family is the only path forward for his career and our legacy. You were a sweet little distraction, darling, but you simply do not possess the pedigree to sit at our table. My heart pounded furiously against my ribs. We have a wedding in 4 days, I whispered. Everything is booked. Oh, don't worry about the venue. Eleanor chuckled lightly. I am not one to waste a deposit. I have repurposed the Plaza Ballroom. We are turning the reception into a lavish charity gala to officially introduce Nathaniel and Penelope as a couple to society. The flowers, the food, the orchestra, it will all go towards celebrating a true power couple. She was stealing my wedding. She was taking the day I had meticulously planned and using it to launch my fiancé's new relationship. "You're a monster," I breathed. "I am a realist," she countered sharply. "Now please ensure any meager belongings you left at Nathaniel's apartment are retrieved by his assistant tomorrow, and Amelia. Do us all a favor and disappear. You are utterly out of your depth." The line went dead. I sat on the edge of my bed in the suffocating silence of my apartment. For 2 hours I just cried. I cried for the death of the man I thought I knew. I cried for my own foolishness for enduring 2 years of emotional abuse from his mother. I cried because I felt small, worthless, and utterly defeated. And then as the tears dried, something shifted. The sorrow burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard ember of absolute fury. Eleanor thought I was a penniless nobody. She thought I was a peasant she could scrape off her designer's shoes. She believed she possessed the ultimate power because she had a penthouse and an exclusive country club membership. She had no idea what power actually was. I wiped my face, stood up, and walked over to my locked antique desk. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a heavy velvet-lined box. Inside lay a secure satellite phone directly linked to the royal palace of San Stefano. It was time to wake up the king. The phone rang exactly once before the line was securely encrypted and answered. "San Stefano Royal Communications. Protocol Alpha." The brisk military voice of the royal operator snapped through the speaker. "This is Her Royal Highness Princess Amelia." I said, my voice eerily calm. "I need to speak to my grandfather immediately. Priority level red." There was a brief pause, a shuffle of connections, and then the deep, resonant voice of King Richard boomed through the receiver. "Amelia, my little lioness, I did not expect to hear from you until tomorrow. Are the final preparations for the wedding proceeding Saktarao?" Hearing his voice so full of genuine warmth and protective love almost broke my resolve, but the steel in my spine held firm. "There is no wedding, grandfather," I said, my voice steady. "Nathaniel broke the engagement an hour ago, over a text message." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute heavy and terrifying. When my grandfather finally spoke, the warmth was gone. In its place was the chilling, calculated tone of a monarch who had ruthlessly navigated global politics for half a century. "Explain," he commanded. I told him everything. I told him about the 2 years of Eleanor's subtle cruelties. I told him about Nathaniel's sudden cowardice, his defection to Penelope Astor, and the ultimate insult, Eleanor's plan to use my wedding venue, the flowers I picked, the menu I designed as a grand society debut for her son and his new aristocratic mistress. "They think I am a peasant." I finished staring at my reflection in the mirror above my desk. "They think I have no family, no wealth, and no power to fight back. They think they can discard me and dance on my grave this Saturday night at the plaza." "I see," King Richard said softly. It was a dangerous softness. "And what is it you wish to do, Amelia? Do you wish to return home and heal?" "No," I replied, my eyes narrowing. "I have hidden my bloodline for 2 years to protect my heart, and it got me slaughtered. I want to show Eleanor Pierce exactly what a pedigree looks like. I want to crush her illusion of power." A low, rumbling laugh echoed through the phone. It was the sound of a king preparing for war. Spoken like a true sovereign of San Stefano, the Pierces believe they are the apex predators of their little concrete island. We shall teach them the difference between new money arrogance and ancient royal authority. "What do we do?" I asked. "You do nothing but rest and prepare," my grandfather instructed. "I will deploy the Royal Vanguard to New York immediately. I am activating our diplomatic channels. By tomorrow evening, the landscape of Manhattan society will look very different to the Pierce family." "What time does this charity gala begin on Saturday?" 8 o'clock. "Excellent. You will attend this gala, Amelia, but you will not attend as Amelia Rose, the art restorer. You will attend as Her Royal Highness. We will give Mrs. Pierce the grand society debut she so desperately craves. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in quiet, devastating orchestration. My grandfather did not just fly to New York, he descended upon it. Because San Stefano was a crucial European banking hub and a major ally to the United States, a visit from the king triggered a massive diplomatic protocol. The Waldorf Astoria's presidential tower was entirely cleared out and secured by Secret Service and the Royal Guard. I was moved from my tiny Chelsea apartment in the dead of night, escorted by 4 imposing men in dark suits. When I arrived at the penthouse suite at the Waldorf, my grandfather was waiting. Even at 75, King Richard was a towering figure of authority dressed in a sharp, bespoke suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight. "You survived the wolves, my dear," he whispered. "Now let the lion hunt." Over the next 2 days, while I was pampered, massaged, and fitted for a custom-made haute couture gown, flown in directly from Milan, my grandfather's operatives went to work. The Pierce family's wealth was significant, but in the grand scheme of global finance, they were small fish. Nathaniel's hedge fund relied heavily on international sovereign wealth investments. Eleanor's precious society charities relied on grants from European philanthropists. We didn't destroy them financially, that would be too crude, too easily traced. Instead, we isolated them. Meanwhile, Eleanor was parading around Manhattan completely oblivious to the invisible noose tightening around her social standing. According to our intelligence gathered by the Royal Security Team, who had effortlessly hacked into the plaza's event planning database, Eleanor had sent out emergency engraved invitations for her Gala of New Beginnings. She had invited the absolute upper echelon of New York, the mayor, several governors' prominent Wall Street titans, and the city's oldest families. She wanted the world to see Nathaniel and Penelope. She wanted to publicly erase me. On Friday afternoon, the day before the event, I sat in the Waldorf suite sipping tea, while my grandfather's chief of staff, a brilliant tactician named Lord Sterling, named Lord Harrington, briefed us. "Your Majesty, Your Highness." Lord Harrington said, bowing slightly. "The guest list for the Pierce event tomorrow has been secured. We have taken the liberty of contacting the most prominent attendees through our diplomatic attachés. When they realize King Richard of San Stefano is hosting a private, highly exclusive royal reception in New York on the exact same night, we anticipate a significant shift in their priorities." My grandfather smiled, sipping his espresso. "And the Plaza Hotel?" "The Plaza management has been informed that a foreign head of state will be making an unscheduled appearance at the Pierce event for approximately 20 minutes. The Secret Service has already commandeered the hotel's security protocols. Mrs. Pierce is entirely unaware. She believes the increased security presence is a complimentary upgrade due to the Astor family's influence." I looked out the massive floor-to-ceiling windows at the Manhattan skyline. For 2 years, I had walked those streets feeling like a ghost, pretending to be small to make Nathaniel comfortable. I had let a mediocre man and his vicious mother dictate my worth. Saturday arrived with a heavy, dramatic downpour, the rain washing the streets of New York clean. By 6 p.m., I was sitting in front of a vanity mirror, while a team of royal stylists worked their magic. The art restorer was gone. In her place sat a princess. My dress was a masterpiece of deep emerald green silk, designed to drape flawlessly over my frame. It was elegant, powerful, and screamed old-world wealth. But the crowning glory was the jewelry. For 2 years, I had worn a cheap tarnished silver chain because Nathaniel said it suited my bohemian vibe. Tonight, my grandfather had unlocked the royal vaults. Around my neck sat the San Stefano star, a breathtaking necklace featuring a flawless 70-carat emerald surrounded by a constellation of diamonds. It was a museum-quality piece, an heirloom that had belonged to my family for 400 years. Its value was astronomical, easily worth more than the entire Pierce family's real estate portfolio. My grandfather walked into the dressing room wearing his formal military dress uniform, adorned with sashes and medals of honor. He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with fierce pride. "Are you ready to reclaim your narrative, Amelia?" he asked, extending his arm. I stood up, the emeralds resting heavy and cold against my collarbone. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a profound sense of clarity. I wasn't doing this just to be petty. I was doing this to remind them that treating people like disposable garbage has consequences. "I am ready, grandfather," I said, taking his arm. "Let's go to my wedding." The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel is a masterpiece of Gilded Age architecture, a cavernous space of crystal chandeliers, mirrored walls, and intricate frescoes. By 8 o'clock that Saturday evening, it had been transformed into Eleanor Pierce's ultimate vision of aristocratic triumph. Tens of thousands of dollars worth of imported Dutch white peonies cascaded from silver urns. A 12-piece string orchestra played Vivaldi softly from the balcony. Waiters in pristine white jackets circulated with trays of vintage Dom Perignon and caviar blinis. Everything was utterly flawless. There was only one problem: the room was practically empty. Eleanor stood near the sweeping entrance staircase, her smile tightening into a rigid, panicked grimace as she checked her diamond-encrusted Cartier watch for the 5th time in 10 minutes. It was 8:45 p.m. "Where is the mayor?" Eleanor hissed to her husband Robert, a perpetually exhausted man who had long ago surrendered his spine to his wife's ambitions. "And the senator?" "The entire Astor family table is empty save for Penelope. This is a disaster. Did the invitations have the wrong time? I don't know, Eleanor." Robert sighed, loosening his bow tie. "My partners from the firm haven't arrived either. I received a text from the CEO saying there was an unavoidable diplomatic conflict, something about a last-minute royal reception at the Waldorf." Eleanor scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "A royal reception in New York, please. If there were European royalty in the city, my committee would have been the first to know. It's the rain. The traffic must be horrendous." Across the room, Nathaniel was standing near the ice sculpture, looking remarkably uncomfortable. Beside him stood Penelope Astor. Penelope was undoubtedly beautiful, but she possessed the distinct bored haughtiness of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. She was currently glaring at the sparse crowd tapping her manicured nails against her champagne flute. "Nathaniel, this is embarrassing," Penelope drawled loudly enough for nearby C-list guests to hear. "You told me this was the event of the season. My parents didn't even bother showing up. They went to some exclusive diplomatic summit instead. I feel like I'm at a suburban high school reunion." "I'm sure people are just running late, Penny." Nathaniel placated a bead of sweat forming on his forehead. He looked exhausted, the reality of his hasty betrayal perhaps beginning to weigh on him. He had traded a quiet, loving relationship for a business transaction, and the launch party was currently tanking. At 8:55 p.m., the heavy brass doors of the ballroom swung open, and Eleanor's face lit up with desperate relief. "Finally," she breathed, smoothing her gown and stepping forward to greet whoever had arrived. But it was not the mayor, nor was it the missing Wall Street elite. It was a wall of men in dark tailored suits wearing earpieces. 6 United States Secret Service agents fanned out into the room, their eyes scanning the perimeter with cold, practiced efficiency. They were immediately followed by 4 members of the San Stefano Royal Guard, dressed in their ceremonial but highly functional charcoal dress uniforms. The string orchestra abruptly stopped playing. The handful of guests who had shown up fell completely silent, parting like the Red Sea, as the security detail secured the center of the ballroom. Eleanor, blinded by her own ego, misread the situation entirely. She turned to Penelope with a triumphant, beaming smile. "Oh, my word. The Secret Service, Penelope, darling, your family must have pulled some strings. The Vice President must be making a surprise appearance to bless your union with Nathaniel." Penelope frowned, looking genuinely confused. "My family hates the Vice President, Eleanor. We wouldn't invite him to a dog show." Before Eleanor could process this, a man in a sharp tuxedo with a subtle royal lapel pin, Lord Harrington, stepped to the top of the grand staircase. He held no microphone, but his booming aristocratic voice easily commanded the echoing, half-empty ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lord Harrington announced, his tone ringing with absolute authority, Please stand and direct your attention to the entrance, presenting His Serene Majesty, King Richard of the Sovereign Principality of San Stefano. Eleanor blinked. Nathaniel froze his champagne glass, hovering halfway to his mouth. And Her Royal Highness Princess Amelia. For a heavy, agonizing second, the name hung in the air. Princess Amelia. Nathaniel's face drained of all color, transforming into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. He knew that name. He knew the woman he had discarded. But his brain violently rejected the title attached to it. The heavy doors at the top of the staircase opened entirely. The light from the hallway caught the edge of the jewels first, throwing a blinding scatter of emerald and diamond reflections across the mirrored walls. And then I stepped forward. My grandfather, a commanding presence of military precision and regal dominance, held out his arm. I rested my gloved hand lightly upon it. Together we began the slow, deliberate descent down the grand staircase. I looked nothing like the girl who had worn paint-splattered overalls in Chelsea. The emerald silk gown trailed behind me like liquid glass. The San Stefano star rested against my collarbone, a heavy, breathtaking declaration of wealth and ancient power that silenced the room. My posture, which Eleanor had so often criticized, was the rigid, flawless carriage of a woman born to rule. I kept my eyes locked directly on Nathaniel. As we reached the bottom of the stairs, Nathaniel's champagne flute slipped from his trembling fingers. It shattered against the marble floor, the sharp crack echoing like a gunshot in the dead silence. "Amelia," Nathaniel whispered, his voice cracking violently. He took a half step forward, his eyes darting frantically from my face to the priceless jewels, to the King of San Stefano standing beside me. "Amelia, what is this? What is going on?" Before I could speak, Eleanor surged forward. Her face was a mottled, terrifying shade of red. Her reality was fracturing in real time, and she was desperately trying to glue it back together with sheer denial. "Security!" Eleanor shrieked, pointing a shaking, manicured finger at me. "Security, remove this woman immediately. This is a private event. I don't know what kind of elaborate, pathetic costume stunt this is, but you are trespassing at my gala." One of the Secret Service agents smoothly stepped into Eleanor's path, placing a firm, immovable hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, you need to step back. Now." "Do you know who I am?" Eleanor demanded, turning her fury on the federal agent. "We know exactly who you are, Mrs. Pierce." King Richard's voice rumbled. It was deep calm and laced with absolute menace. He stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of me. "You are the woman who insulted my granddaughter, hijacked her wedding venue, and attempted to publicly humiliate her. I am King Richard of San Stefano, and you, Mrs. Pierce, are a very foolish, very insignificant woman." Eleanor's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. The absolute authority radiating from my grandfather physically backed her up. She looked at Nathaniel, then at Penelope, searching for someone to validate her sinking reality. I stepped around my grandfather, walking slowly toward Nathaniel. The royal guard parted to let me through. Nathaniel looked as though he was going to be sick. "Hello, Nathaniel," I said. My voice was calm, perfectly modulated, and completely devoid of the affection I had once held for him. "Amelia, you're a princess." He stammered, looking at me as if I were a ghost. "Why didn't you tell me, my God, Amelia, if I had known?" "Well, sir, if you had known, you would have stayed." I finished for him, my tone laced with ice. "You would have married me for my vault, for my title, for the access it would grant your pitiful hedge fund. I wanted a man who loved Amelia Rose, the artist. I hid my crown to protect myself from opportunists. It seems my instincts were entirely correct." "No, Amelia, please!" Nathaniel begged, reaching out a hand toward me. A royal guard instantly stepped forward, his hand resting casually on the hilt of his ceremonial sword, causing Nathaniel to violently yank his arm back. "I made a mistake. My mother pressured me. I love you. We can fix this. The wedding is in 2 days. We can still do it." I let out a soft, elegant laugh. It was a cruel sound. "There is no wedding, Nathaniel. You canceled it via text message, remember, because I didn't have the pedigree to sit at your mother's table. I turned my gaze to Eleanor, who was visibly shaking, realizing the magnitude of the social and financial disaster unfolding before her. Your gala is rather empty, Eleanor, I noted, gesturing to the vacant tables. My grandfather was hosting a private reception tonight at the Waldorf. It seems the mayor, the governor, and the entirety of Wall Street preferred to drink our champagne rather than yours. We merely stopped by to see what you did with my floral arrangements. The peonies are lovely, by the way. You ruined us. Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling with tears of pure narcissistic rage. You stole our guests. I merely presented them with a better option, I replied coolly. Just as you encouraged your son to do with Penelope. At the mention of her name, Penelope Astor, who had been watching the exchange with wide, horrified eyes, suddenly moved. She did not possess loyalty, but she possessed an acute survival instinct. She recognized a sinking ship, and she knew her family's old money reputation could not withstand the fallout of antagonizing a reigning European monarch. Nathaniel, Penelope said, her voice dripping with sudden venomous disgust. Do not ever contact me again. This is entirely repulsive. Pennyweight. Nathaniel cried out as Penelope turned on her heel, marching toward the exit without a backward glance. I looked at the man I had loved for 2 years. He was ruined. His fiancée had abandoned him. His new aristocratic prize had publicly dumped him, and his mother's social standing in New York had just been utterly obliterated by a simple stroke of royal scheduling. Consider the deposit on this ballroom a parting gift, Nathaniel, I said softly, delivering the final fatal blow. You're going to need the charity. I turned my back on him. I didn't look at Eleanor. I placed my hand back on my grandfather's arm. We are finished here, grandfather, I said. Indeed we are, my dear. King Richard replied, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. As we walked back up the grand staircase, flanked by the Secret Service and the Royal Vanguard, the silence in the room was absolute. We walked out of the Plaza Hotel and into the waiting motorcade, leaving Nathaniel and Eleanor standing in the ruins of their own making, surrounded by thousands of dying white peonies. The Sunday morning following the disastrous gala at the Plaza dawned bright and deceptively cheerful over Manhattan. I sat in the dining room of the Waldorf Astoria's presidential suite, sipping freshly squeezed orange juice while gazing out at the sprawling green rectangle of Central Park. My grandfather sat across from me, a tablet in his hands, reading the morning briefs from our intelligence division with a look of mild, predatory amusement. It appears, King Richard noted, his voice smooth and satisfied, that high society operates with the same ruthless efficiency as a pack of starved wolves. The moment they smell weakness, they turn on their own. He turned the tablet toward me. The headline of New York's most vicious and well-read society blog, the Manhattan Observer, blared in bold black letters, "The Phantom Princess, How the Pierce Family Lost a Crown and Their Crowd." The article detailed the catastrophic failure of Eleanor's event, Penelope Astor's dramatic exit, and the sudden shocking revelation that the quiet art restorer Nathaniel Pierce had dumped via text was actually European royalty. The anonymous quotes from the diplomatic attendees who had graced our Waldorf reception were brutal. They painted Eleanor as a delusional social climber and Nathaniel as an ambitious fool who had fumbled the greatest alliance in modern New York history. But social humiliation was only the first wave of the tsunami we had unleashed. The true devastation began at 9 a.m. on Monday morning. I was in the middle of a fitting for a tailored traveling suit when my grandfather's chief of staff, Lord Harrington, entered the room carrying a secure dossier. Your Highness, Lord Harrington said, offering a crisp nod, the financial audits you requested on the Pierce family have been completed, and the results are illuminating. I stepped off the fitting pedestal, wrapping a silk robe around my shoulders. Show me. I spent the next hour poring over the documents, and suddenly the pieces of Nathaniel's sudden betrayal snapped into horrifying, crystal-clear focus. Eleanor had always projected the image of infinite wealth, the penthouse, the country clubs, the designer gowns, but it was an elaborate, terrifyingly fragile house of cards. The Pierce family was drowning in debt. Robert Pierce's law practice had been quietly hemorrhaging money for 5 years. Eleanor had mortgaged their Upper East Side penthouse to the absolute limit to maintain her lavish lifestyle and her position on the boards of 3 major charities. Nathaniel's salary at the private equity firm, while substantial, was entirely consumed by paying off his parents' crippling interest rates. The Astor marriage hadn't just been about social climbing. It had been a desperate, calculated financial bailout. Penelope Astor was worth $3 billion. I, as Amelia Rose, was worth nothing. Nathaniel had discarded me not just out of cowardice, but because his mother had convinced him that marrying Penelope was the only way to save their family from absolute bankruptcy. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. In his desperation to save his family's fake wealth, Nathaniel had walked away from one of the wealthiest royal bloodlines on the planet. "They are completely over-leveraged," I murmured, tracing a manicured finger over a spreadsheet detailing Eleanor's outstanding loans. "If the Astor alliance is dead, they have no safety net." "None whatsoever," Lord Harrington confirmed smoothly. Furthermore, the CEO of Nathaniel's firm, Arthur Pendleton, was one of the guests at His Majesty's reception on Saturday night. Mr. Pendleton relies heavily on European sovereign wealth funds to maintain his firm's liquidity. He was made quietly aware that employing a man who had publicly insulted the royal house of San Stefano might complicate future investments. I looked up, my eyes wide. Did Arthur fire him? At 8 o'clock this morning, Lord Harrington smiled thinly. Nathaniel Pierce was escorted from the building by security. His severance package was revoked due to a morals clause regarding public scandals that damaged the firm's reputation. While Nathaniel was losing his career, Eleanor was losing her crown. At noon, Beatrice Montgomery, the undisputed queen of Manhattan's philanthropic circles and the chairwoman of the Metropolitan Charity Foundation, called an emergency board meeting. Eleanor had spent decades kissing up to Beatrice, desperate for her validation. We received the transcript of the meeting later that afternoon. Beatrice, who had been thoroughly charmed by my grandfather at our reception, did not mince words. She demanded Eleanor's immediate resignation from all charity boards. "You have made us a laughingstock, Eleanor Sonnel." Beatrice had reportedly stated in front of 20 of New York's most powerful women, "You attempted to pass off an empty ballroom. As the event of the season, you alienated the Astor family, and you profoundly insulted a reigning European monarch whose philanthropic grants fund half this city's arts programs. Clean out your locker at the club, Eleanor. You are done." By Tuesday morning, the Pierce family was in a state of absolute unchecked freefall. My phone, the old one, which I'd kept turned on purely out of morbid curiosity, had over 50 missed calls and hundreds of text messages from Nathaniel. The messages were a pathetic descending spiral of grief, manipulation, and panic. "Amelia, please. I know you're angry, but we need to talk. Amelia, I was fired. My mother is having a breakdown. Please just give me 5 minutes. I love you. I always loved you. The Astor thing was a mistake. My mother forced me into it because of our debts. I didn't want to. Amelia, they're foreclosing on the penthouse. Please, if you ever loved me, just talk to your grandfather. Call off his dogs." I read the messages with a cold, detached fascination. 2 years of my life had been spent loving a man who was nothing more than a hollow, spineless puppet, dancing to the tune of his mother's vanity. He wasn't apologizing because he had broken my heart. He was apologizing because he had broken his own bank account. I deleted the messages and tossed the phone into the trash can. "Are we returning to San Stefano today?" Grandfather Easton, I asked, walking into the main lounge where King Richard was enjoying a cup of Earl Grey. "The jet is prepped for a 5 o'clock departure," he replied, his eyes crinkling warmly. "Have you achieved the closure you desired, Amelia?" Almost. I said, looking out at the city that had caused me so much pain, but had ultimately set me free. There is one last thing I need to do, and I need to do it alone. Before I could permanently close the chapter on Amelia Rose, I needed to retrieve something from my old Chelsea art studio. It wasn't anything of high monetary value, just a set of antique bone-handled restoration brushes that had been gifted to me by my mentor in Florence. They were the tools that grounded me, the tools that reminded me of my passion outside of my royal duties. I requested a single unmarked black SUV and one plainclothes royal guard, a massive silent man named Captain Reynolds. He drove me to the dusty brick-faced building in Chelsea. The rain had returned a slow, miserable drizzle that cast a gray pall over the city. "Wait here, Captain," I instructed, pulling the collar of my trench coat up against the damp air. "I will only be 5 minutes. I'll be watching the door, Your Highness." Reynolds replied, his eyes scanning the street with hawkish intensity. I unlocked the heavy wooden door of the studio and inhaled the familiar comforting scent of linseed oil, turpentine, and old dust. The room was shadowed, lit only by the gray light filtering through the large skylight. I walked over to my workstation, retrieved the wooden box containing my brushes, and turned to leave. "I knew you'd come back here." The voice came from the shadows near the back supply closet. I didn't jump. I didn't scream. I simply tightened my grip on the wooden box and watched as Nathaniel stepped into the dim light. He looked absolutely horrific. The polished, arrogant junior partner who had worn perfectly tailored Tom Ford suits and a Rolex was gone. He was wearing a rumpled sweater, his hair was unwashed, and he had dark bruised bags under his bloodshot eyes. He looked like a man who had not slept in 3 days. "You're trespassing, Nathaniel," I said, my voice as flat and unyielding as a sheet of ice. "The building manager revoked your access when I terminated my lease yesterday." "I slipped in behind the mailman," he muttered, taking a hesitant step forward. He looked at me, taking in my immaculate clothes, my perfect posture, the undeniable aura of wealth and authority that I no longer bothered to hide. "You look different." "I look like myself," I corrected him. "You just never bothered to look closely." "Amelia, please." He choked out the desperation, cracking his voice. He took another step, his hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "You have to stop this. You've made your point. My firm fired me. Penelope's father called every bank in the city and had our credit lines frozen. My mother is in a psychiatric facility in Connecticut because she had a complete nervous breakdown when the country club revoked her membership. I am sorry for your mother's health," I said neutrally. "But my grandfather and I did not freeze your credit lines, nor did we force you to live beyond your means for decades. We merely exposed the truth. The consequences are entirely of your own making." "We were drowning!" Nathaniel yelled, a sudden ugly flash of anger breaking through his pathetic facade. "You don't understand what it's like. The pressure to maintain the image, the legacy we owed millions. When Penelope came along, she was a lifeline. I had to do it for my family. If you had just told me who you were, if you had just told me you had money, we could have been married." I stared at him, letting his horrific words hang in the silent, dusty air. "Listen to yourself, Nathaniel," I whispered, disgusted. "You are confirming everything I feared. If I had told you I was a princess, you wouldn't have loved me more. You just would have used my bank account instead of Penelope Astor's. You didn't want a wife. You wanted a human ATM to fund your mother's delusions." "That's not true," he protested, though the lie was evident in the panicked shifting of his eyes. "I loved you. The pizza on the bridge, the walks in the park. That was real. If it was real, a text message wouldn't have ended it." I fired back, my voice echoing off the brick walls. "If it was real, you would have stood up to Eleanor when she insulted my clothes, my job, and my dignity for 2 years. You are a coward, Nathaniel. You always were." His face darkened, and for a split second I saw the vicious, cornered animal beneath the polished exterior. He lunged forward, grabbing my upper arm. "You owe me Amelia. You took away my livelihood. You owe me a settlement, at least. Before I could even react, the heavy studio door was kicked violently open, splintering the wood. Captain Reynolds moved with terrifying speed. In a blur of motion, the massive guard crossed the room, grabbed Nathaniel by the collar of his rumpled sweater, and slammed him brutally against the brick wall. Nathaniel gasped for air, his feet dangling an inch off the ground as Reynolds pinned him with one massive forearm across his throat. "Do not touch Her Royal Highness," Reynolds growled, his voice a low, lethal rumble, "or I will break every bone in your hands." Nathaniel gagged his eyes wide with genuine terror as he clawed helplessly at the guard's arm. "Captain," I said quietly. Reynolds didn't look back, but he slightly loosened his grip, allowing Nathaniel to drag in a ragged breath. I walked slowly toward Nathaniel, stopping inches from his face. He was trembling violently, tears of pain and humiliation streaming down his cheeks. "This is the last time you will ever see me, Nathaniel." I said, my voice perfectly steady. "You will not call. You will not text. You will not approach any property associated with San Stefano. If you attempt to sell this story to the press, my grandfather's legal team will bury you under so many defamation lawsuits your grandchildren will be paying them off." I reached out and brushed a piece of dust off his shoulder, a mocking, aristocratic gesture that I knew would cut him to the bone. "You wanted to marry into power," I whispered. "Now you know what power actually feels like. Goodbye, Nathaniel." I turned my back on him. "Release him, Captain. Let's go home." Reynolds dropped Nathaniel like a sack of garbage. Nathaniel crumpled to the floor, coughing and gasping for air among the wood shavings, and spilled paint, a broken, ruined man in the ruins of the life he threw away. I didn't look back as I walked out of the studio and into the waiting rain. 2 weeks later, the New York real estate market welcomed a highly sought-after listing, a sprawling Upper East Side penthouse sold at a distress auction by the bank to cover the massive defaulted debts of Robert and Eleanor Pierce. The society pages had already moved on to their next scandal, leaving the Pierce family to fade into the bleak, humiliating obscurity of the middle class they had always so violently despised. As for me, I was thousands of miles away, sitting on the sun-drenched terrace of the Royal Palace in San Stefano. The Mediterranean Sea glittered like crushed sapphires in the distance. I had learned a brutal lesson in New York. I had learned that hiding your light to make others comfortable only allows them to keep you in the dark. I would never hide my crown again. I didn't stop restoring art either. I merely scaled up. Using my grandfather's vast resources, I opened the San Stefano Royal Academy of Restoration, bringing in students from all over the world to preserve history. I was no longer Amelia Rose, the quiet girl in the dusty overalls trying to appease a toxic mother-in-law. I was Princess Amelia. I had faced the wolves of high society, and I had returned wearing their pelts. Betrayal had broken my heart, but reclaiming my power had healed my soul. And as the warm Mediterranean breeze ruffled the pages of my sketchbook, I smiled, knowing that my greatest masterpiece was not on a canvas, but in the life I had finally chosen for myself. If you love this story of royal revenge, betrayal, and absolute power, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that your true worth is never defined by people who treat you like an option. Have you ever had a partner show their true colors right before a major commitment? Drop your stories in the comments below. I read every single one. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on more dramatic, real-life twists and satisfying karma. See you in the next video.